Hey everyone, how are we doing today? Are you doing good? If so, I'm sorry for what is about to happen. We're both about to not be good. Everybody here as a collective is going to be in a place of not goodness. And the reason why is we're going to be talking about our best friend on the internet today, NeoJesus, once again. As you may have known, one of the more popular videos on this channel is a video of me reacting to NeoJesus's video about film critics online and how they're awful and how they're so cynical and how they're stupid. If you haven't seen that one, which I doubt, I will leave a link to it in the description. But I have always intended on talking about the second NeoJesus video, which is a much shorter follow-up video, and we're gonna be doing that now. So buckle in, get ready, here we go.
There has to be some reporting in every review. I mean, first of all, you have to play fair with your reader. Here's what I think a movie review should do. The first thing it should do, it should give some notion to the reader of what the movie is about and what it is like. If you play fair with your reader, you can give a movie a bad review and they'll still be able to read that review and know that they would like to go see that movie. You shouldn't just, blast it in such a way that the reader would think no reasonable person would ever want to go to this film. You have to give the movie its day in court too. There has to be something in there that conveys what the experience is like.
So Neo starts off this video, just like his original, with a pull quote from a very prominent media member, a very prominent person in the entertainment industry. Last time it was Butch Hartman, this time it's Roger Ebert. And the problem is they sound good. These pull quotes sound like they make sense and are supporting his case that he will be talking about later on in the video. But in all actuality, they don't. You see, Roger Ebert can say that all he wants, but he is a bit of a hypocrite. And it's funny because this ties into the original video. If you watch that and remember it, or if you haven't, please go watch it before I continue talking. It kind of goes over some things that we'll talk about in this video. He has, Neo, a very, very interesting relationship with the Transformers series. He loves Transformers. He thinks that it's a pretty solid movie, a 5 out of 10 if you will. And he thinks that people should stop ragging on the Transformers movies. And in this little pull quote, Roger Ebert says, you need to give every film a fair shake. You can't blast it to the point where nobody will want to see it. You need to give somewhat of a feeling. You need to make an audience understand what they're going to be getting out of the experience. And funny enough, Neo, your boy, when he reviewed Revenge of the Fallen, a Transformers film, in 2009, he just spent 7 paragraphs absolutely taking a whole dump on it with absolutely no constructive things that he mentioned in that little pull quote. He's just shitting on it for 7 paragraphs with absolutely no feelings being described, absolutely no environment being described, like he said. So once again, you had the right idea, but just look into the context of things and you'll see it doesn't really work in the way that you want it to. I know you're against the art of cynicism, and we simply can't have you being hypocritical, Neo. That would be completely out of character for you.
So not too long ago, I released a video where I discussed some of my biggest problems with internet movie critics. This video isn't going to be like that video.
Well, this is good news, Neo. I'm really excited. So no pretentiousness, no hypocrisy, no horrible jokes. I'm very excited to see how this is going to differ from the original video.
This video is for the most part unscripted, and there won't be any fancy editing in the video either, since I wanted to just have a much more relaxed discussion about the topic. I also just really wanted to test this new Sony F3 that I'm filming this on, as well as the new Rode NTG4 that's recording all the audio.
Okay, well, the pretentiousness bit, yeah, you still have that, but maybe the other two can still stay intact, maybe. And B, did you divulging that information to us about the camera and the audio recorder really contribute to the video at all whatsoever? No? Okay.
First of all, I'd like to explain my last video and answer some of the questions about why I included certain movie critics and then excluded certain others. Originally, I wanted to do the video without name dropping anyone at all because, generally speaking, I feel like videos where you discuss other YouTubers and content creators by critiquing them and calling them out by name is generally really sensationalist, and there's not really any right way to do it without coming off as if you're looking for attention.
All right, Neo, my guy, my buddy, my brethren, let's talk about it, shall we? Because I usually like to speak based off of facts that I can research and then back up my argument. But this one, you folks will just have to trust me that this is a very good inference. You are lying through your teeth. You are just not telling the truth. And this is based off of two things. One, your 30-minute video consists of basically 3/4 of it consists of you deconstructing the criticism style of 3 different YouTubers, 4 if you count that little Jeremy Johns part. But that's like the entirety of your video. What would your video have been if not for that? And you don't even bring up like sub points and you're like, hey, this is a problem that I have with film critics. Here's an example of a critic who does this that I have a problem with. No, you bring up the critics and then you bring up the problems with it. You could have structured that in a completely different way and it would have come off as less clout chasey, but you didn't because you're lying. 2, you, for the past 3 years, have just done that. You saw that it worked one time, and you've been riding that wave. You took apart all of Ralph the Movie Maker's videos. You took apart movies. You took apart all of the Red Letter Media movies. You have literally just made videos about YouTubers over and over again. That's what you do. That's how you've gained your internet clout. So saying this in this video is just completely disingenuous.
But I eventually realized that if I didn't specifically state who the people that were suffering from the problems that I talked about actually were, I would probably just confuse a lot of people, and I'd get a lot of comments asking me if I was talking about X movie reviewer or Y movie reviewer. So I just ultimately decided that it would be best to just come right out and speak my mind.
Hard disagree. Hard disagree. Like I said in the previous segment, you could just list off the problems you have with the general brand of cynical YouTubers, and you could discuss in depth why these problems affect the state of the film criticism community online. And then the only problem you have is the footage. What do you show? And if you want to be really diligent about it, you could show film clips, but you could also just show clips of the people that you're discussing, and that's not being sensationalist. You're just including them as examples, and you don't have to focus the entirety of the video basically on them. It's super simple, super easy, but you just want the clout. Just admit it, please.
Unfortunately, though, I still got a lot of comments from people asking me what my opinions on certain critics that I didn't include in the video are. And for the most part, the critics that I didn't include in the video fall into 2 main categories. There's the people that I wanted to discuss more thoroughly than I could have realistically done in this video, in which case those critics will get their own individual video somewhere along the line. And then there's the people that I just really didn't have that much to say about.
Oh my God. Well, there goes number 2, hypocrisy. We've come around to it. And, you can tell this is an unscripted video because in his scripted video, he does contradict himself in a short time frame. But here, he does it within literally, I think, 20, 30 seconds? Are you kidding me? You just said that you don't like when people use names of critics and names of people in order to garner clout, and it's just way too sensational. But then you just say immediately afterwards, hey, I didn't mention these critics because they're going to get a video on them in the future. So you're just lying, and you do not see how these two things don't connect. Your mindset isn't right. It's not correct. You're driving me crazy, and we're not even 3 minutes in of this 11-minute video.
The most popular person in this category would be I Hate Everything, who I originally wanted to include in the video, but after going back and watching a lot of his content, I found that the overwhelming majority of it is pretty much just boring, because he tends to only go after low-hanging fruit by only reviewing movies that already have overwhelmingly negative reviews on places like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. And personally, I just don't see what's so entertaining about shitting all over a movie that hundreds of people have already shit on before you did.
I think I'm having an aneurysm. NeoJesus actually could have had a point here. He really could have, because I don't think IAG is the most, even though I enjoy his content somewhat, the most interesting critic because of how monotonous his voice is. And he doesn't really tend to deviate from that. So you have a point there if you're like, I just find him boring. His cadence isn't great. His delivery isn't superb, but then he just messes it all up. He doesn't go with the right thing. Instead, he criticizes his series called The Search for the Worst, where he goes through the bottom 100 films on IMDb. A lot of those films which don't have really that many reviews of them on YouTube. Of course, some of them do, like a Birdemic or a Cool Cat or something like that. But there are a lot of the movies that he takes a look at that don't have that many reviews and shitting all over them on YouTube. So he's just kind of wrong again. Even the example he uses, Woody Woodpecker. There aren't really that many Woody animated, like, I think it's the mid-2010s, is it like 2015, Woody Woodpecker reviews on YouTube. So you have the right idea, but you just completely, you get to the right answer by using the wrong setup. It's so stupid.
But with that out of the way, I wanted to talk more about what I think is the biggest problem with movie critics here on YouTube. After a long year of shitting on movies and shitting on the people that make those movies, cynical movie critics all over YouTube will make a video about their favorite films of the year. Some may even go as far to make a video about their favorite films of all time.
Before we get even deeper into this, just think about the fact, just keep it in the back of your brain, that NeoJesus, who hates cynical film criticism, is upset at these critics deviating from said cynical film criticism to talk about things that they love. Just think about that. He is advocating for people to talk about things that they love, and he did advocate for that in his previous video. And when people who are generally cynical do it, it's bad because they go against what he thinks is right. So
And while there are subtle differences between everyone's list, a lot of the times you see the same 5 movies on there. And they're usually the films that everyone already praised endlessly at the Academy Awards earlier in the year. The Wolf of Wall Street, The Revenant, Room, Boyhood, Moonlight, all of these made a lot of people's top 10 lists at the end of the year.
I don't know, bruh. They're good movies for the most part. I'm not super big on Boyhood, but yeah, what's the problem with film critics talking about good movies that they enjoy as opposed to shitting on movies that they don't? You should be advocating for this, so why aren't you?
And while these movies are good, and yes, they may be some of the best films that came out that year, if the title of your video is My Favorite Films of 2019, are you really sharing your favorite movies or just the ones that were good? There's often a lot of really good movies that come out throughout the year that just don't make it to the level of Oscar-worthy, and I never see any internet movie critics even so much as mention a lot of them.
I don't even know what to do at this point. I'm really trying to restrain myself from personal insults. I don't like doing that, but literally, Neo, you must have had a lobotomy at some point on your journey through life, because oh my god, if you have a problem with, why do you have a problem with them saying it's their favorite movies, and you're like, oh, are you sure these aren't your favorite movies, or are they just movies that are good? There are a bunch of other good movies that are out there too that don't really reach Oscar level. Well then, you know, if it's their favorite though, it's not good movies, it's their favorite that they've seen that year. If they haven't seen the good movies, obviously they're not on their list. I get that you're talking about expanding palettes, but you're directly contradicting yourself one line after the other. What are you doing? Who are you? Why are you here? And how can we get rid of you?
And I guess you could make the argument that a lot of movie critics may not have seen these movies or just don't have the same taste as me, but in a sea of internet movie critics, you would think that there would be at least one popular film critic that would have something to say about any of these movies, good, bad, or indifferent.
That's literally just YMS. And that's really all I have to say to this point to counter you, because everybody knows what I'm saying when I say this. That's literally just why you are describing YMS. But you hate him, right? But you want someone like him, right? Get over yourself.
But sadly, a lot of movies just fly under these people's radars because they're just not the movies that everyone's talking about. And whenever film critics do make a video talking about underrated movies, it's always the same movies over and over again. Drive, Nightcrawler, Cinedoki, New York.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Cinedoki, New York.
No, just one more time.
Cinedoki, New York.
Okay, promise, last time, but give it to me once more.
Cinedoki, New York.
Ah, refreshing. NeoJesus is talking about underrated movies that are constantly brought up, yet doesn't even know how to say the title of one of the underrated movies that are constantly brought up. Classic NeoJesus moment. Epic NeoJesus moment.
And while all of these are great movies, if everyone's calling them underrated, are they really underrated?
Oh my gosh, everybody, break out the candles, break out the cake. NeoJesus has made a correct point in one of his videos, ladies and gentlemen. This is a marvel to be seen. Yes, you're right. There is a constant mix-up amongst audiences and film critics between underrated and underappreciated or undervalued. Underrated means that critically acclaimed films don't get the critical acclaim they deserved, and all of those movies you mentioned do get the acclaim they deserved, but they're usually overlooked when talking about other movies. You're right, it's not underrated. I'm so proud of you, baby boo.
Sure, Martin Scorsese is an amazing director, but how come whenever he comes out with a new movie, it's always in everybody's end of the year lists? Same thing with Wes Anderson or Quentin Tarantino.
Because they're good movies from good directors that get pushed out to the masses, as opposed to other good movies from good directors that do not get pushed out to the masses. This isn't really a hard concept to grasp.
Yes, Wolf of Wall Street was an amazing film, but I don't think it was anywhere close to being one of my favorite films of that year. Mostly because I have really oddball tastes.
NeoJesus is just the human embodiment of the I'm weird Jughead meme from Riverdale, and you can't convince me otherwise.
And I feel like if more film critics on YouTube were being genuine rather than just agreeing with the majority opinion, I feel like you would see more of their oddball tastes shine through in their reviews rather than just hearing them regurgitate the same shit over and over again. Now, while it may seem like I'm being harsh here, I don't feel like a lot of movie critics do this for the sake of fitting in.
So, just in case you missed that, let's replay those clips back to back once again.
And I feel like if more film critics on YouTube were being genuine rather than just agreeing with the majority opinion, I feel like you would see more of their oddball tastes shine through in their reviews rather than just hearing them regurgitate the same shit over and over again. Now, while it may seem like I'm being harsh here, I don't feel like a lot of movie critics do this for the sake of fitting in.
That is right, ladies and gentlemen. We have a new world record. NeoJesus has contradicted himself within 14 seconds. That is a new world record. Congratulations. At one moment you say, man, these film critics, they're just trying to appeal to the masses, which, by the way, in your original video, you said that was the point of a film critic, is to appeal to the masses. Anyways, and then the next moment he says, but I don't think that most film critics do this to appeal to the masses, even though that's what you just said. What's going on, Neo? Please talk to me. Communicate with me. I want to interview you. I want to pick apart your brains, brother. Let me do it.
I think it's mostly done because people like Scorsese and Tarantino have been in the industry for over 20 years. I mean, that's longer than a lot of these movie critics have been alive.
A, wrong, pretty sure. Most film critics in the YouTube space are over 20 years old. B, your superiority complex is insane. Please stop it.
And Scorsese and Tarantino have very unique styles that have had a lot of impact on filmmaking as a whole. And a lot of new directors take a lot of inspiration from them, so much so that techniques that were once seen as unique to these directors are now the industry standards when it comes to making movies.
I guess there's nothing technically wrong with this point, but aren't you just then arguing for their greatness and their goodness of movies and why they should be on all of these, like, end of the year lists?
What I believe happened is that a lot of these film critics grew up watching movies by Scorsese or Tarantino or Spielberg or Wes Anderson, and so as they got older, the things that they look for in movies are things that remind them of those directors.
Now, Neo, this is where you start to lose me a little bit, because what are these good things that you're talking about? Good stories, good cinematography, good editing, because those are things that have been around far longer than Wes Anderson and Quentin Tarantino and Martin Scorsese. Who do you think they were inspired by? Previous filmmakers. So if you want to play the inspiration game, that's been a thing that's gone on since the early 20th century, buddy. So slow your roll, dude.
Which just so happen to be the things that are included in a lot of Academy Award-winning movies, because a lot of the people in the Academy grew up with those films as well.
Neo, you're doing the thing again where you're avoiding the research on what you're talking about, which makes you look like a complete fool. The film critics that you're talking about that grew up on these films are generally, I'd say, 30 or younger. Do you know what the average age of an Academy member is, according to a research study in 2014 from The Atlantic? 63 years old. So no, they didn't grow up on Scorsese and Tarantino, you buffoon. They grew up on other filmmakers that are older than that. Cut the crap.
And a lot of the filmmakers that make those movies were inspired by the people that worked on those classic films as well, whether it be in the storytelling, in the visual style, or even in the casting choices. And while you may not notice these things while you're watching the movie,
your brain certainly does.
And with that, folks, we've gone 0 for 3. We can cross stupid jokes off of the list, as we see here an incredible classic NeoJesus lip zoom in that adds absolutely no validity to the argument that he's making.
And the reason why you see a lot of the same types of movies getting all the praise from critics is because a lot of critics just haven't evolved past their love for the filmmaking standards that they grew up with. And that's their thing to come to terms with, and I have no say in that because I already broadened my taste just by going to lots of different film festivals.
I don't really think that's true. If you think about it just logically, why would critics want to see the same thing over and over and over again when they could see more diversified things? And that is a mindset that's shared by a lot of the popular film critics in the YouTube space nowadays. And B, please, your superiority complex is insane. Just because you go to local film festivals that show horse manure doesn't mean that you're any better than anybody else. Have you gone to Cannes? Have you gone to TIFF? Have you gone to Sundance? Have you gone to AFI? Have you gone to South by Southwest? I highly doubt that you have, my guy. So just chill. Just because you go to like film festivals and watch 36-hour films doesn't mean that you're better than these film critics who actually do go to film festivals. So just you are literally embarrassing yourself.
But ultimately, what I fear is that as time goes on and the market becomes more saturated and we have more different types of movies coming out, that these old qualities sticking around in the public's eye will eventually cloud out the ability for new things to come to the forefront and set a new standard of filmmaking genius.
Genius is never understood in its own time. Calvin and Hobbes cartoonist Bill Watterson. Now, Neo, the thing you have to understand here is be patient. Genius will be recognized in the future. Things that are revolutionary now that some people may not understand will be recognized in the future. And if you truly have the passion for cinema that you do, just give it a little bit and those things will be recognized. Like you said, everyone makes films like Wes Anderson and Tarantino and Scorsese nowadays. Sure, their films were recognized as great when they came out, but the genius of them truly wasn't implemented in the world of cinema until people were able to watch and draw inspiration from it. So just give it a little bit of time, my guy. Just be patient. That's the best advice I can give for you. And this is I'm actually being genuine here.
I'll use Suicide Squad as an example for the millionth time until people start appreciating the movie as much as I do. While I acknowledge that Suicide Squad is not a great film by any stretch of the imagination, Suicide Squad was probably one of my favorite films of 2016 just because it was a breath of fresh air from the absolutely done-to-death Marvel formula.
Do you even watch movies? Do you watch movies? The whole problem with Suicide Squad is that it had this playground in which to explore, to be gritty, to be real. These are anti-heroes. There are things to explore here, themes, messages that aren't generally explored in superhero films. And what did they do? They made a Marvel movie. They made a Marvel movie with a bunch of jokey quips and a really horribly written evil person and a bunch of like goons to defeat at the end. Like, oh, okay, you know, like just plethora of bad guy. Every Marvel convention in the book is in Suicide Squad. Why are you using this as an example when it fits in the exact formula that the Marvel movies do? It just does it infinitely worse.
Now let's imagine for a second that Suicide Squad came out long before the MCU was introduced. It's hard to imagine that people wouldn't respect the film at least a little bit more, since I feel like a lot of the negative backlash that film receives comes from people's insistence on comparing it to the MCU.
Neo, the reason why people have an insistence of comparing it to the MCU is because it is blatantly attempting to be an MCU movie with a darker edge to it. So I don't understand why that is an invalid comparison at all.
On an even playing field, where being like Marvel or being like Scorsese or being like Spielberg wasn't the golden standard for what was considered a good movie, could Suicide Squad have been to DC what Avengers was to Marvel?
Absolutely not. The characters in this film are not the main characters of your comic book franchise. There's no Superman, there's no Batman, there's no anything like, there's no Wonder Woman, there's no Flash, there's no Cyborg, there's nothing there in that regard. B, the film looks like trash. C, the acting is horrible. D, the lines are horrible. There's no, what are we, some type of Suicide Squad in Avengers, which I'll admit, I don't think is the best, but is infinitely better than Suicide Squad. So no, even if Marvel did not exist and the standards set by Marvel for superhero films did not exist, this would still be a bad film, regardless of the fact that it is just trying to be a Marvel film. And arguably, Suicide Squad would maybe not exist if Marvel did not exist in the way that it did, because they wouldn't try. In fact, one could argue maybe it would be a little bit better. Maybe it would hone in on that darker vision as opposed to just attempting to be their counterpart. So yeah, whatever. Editing Colin here. Hi, how are you doing? I forgot to say something at this part. I never do this, but this was a really important part of the thing, and I forgot to say it. The whole thing about Marvel and Suicide Squad, making comparison there, is kind of BS, because the whole interest in the Avengers, the first film, was seeing all of these stories be built up in previous films and then having all of these storylines collide into one thing. Suicide Squad, we didn't have that, so I just wanted to say that Marvel and Suicide, it could never happen. So it would not be the same thing. Also, just really want to say, look at this guy's smug face. I'm looking at this for like hours upon hours on editing, and it's starting to get to me. I hate him so much.
I feel like there's this guideline that is encouraged by films that are considered to be great, and that iterating on them is such a surefire way of creating the next great film that we don't then go out and try to create something totally different that could very well set the new golden standard for filmmaking, because it's proven that critics just won't respond to it as well.
Neo, my guy, please stop talking out of your ass. Critics do love things that are different and try to be different. Critics liked The Turin Horse. Critics liked Hard to Be a God. Critics liked Enter the Void. Critics liked Victoria. These are 4 completely different films that each approach the medium in a radically different way. You know who is preventing films from evolving and changing? Fans. The average casual moviegoer. If you want to be mad at anyone, be mad at them, because that's who they're selling to. They're not selling to critics. Critics can pan a movie and it will still make so much money at the box office that you'd be able to swim in it. So the critics aren't the problem here. It is the average moviegoer. So again, just incorrect point. Stop it, dude. Stop.
A lot of movie critics, especially the ones here on YouTube, will outline certain elements of a movie that they really like, such as good story, good characters, and scenes that convey strong emotion, and then say that these elements are what makes a movie good, as in all good movies have these elements.
Maybe I'm just watching the wrong side of film YouTube, but I would argue this is once again incorrect. The general sentiment isn't that all good movies have those aspects in them. The general sentiment is, if these movies have that aspect in them, they're generally good. So you flip it, but it makes all of the difference in the world. A film doesn't have to have those things to be good, but if it has those things, it generally is good.
Now, going back to Suicide Squad again, I can understand why some people don't like Suicide Squad, but what I can't understand is when people try to say that Suicide Squad is bad because it doesn't have these elements, because it doesn't have the elements that a good movie is supposed to have.
I know that it's very hard for you to differentiate between things, Neo, but let's try and do it here. Let's really do it. The thing about Suicide Squad, the problem there is that it attempts to have those things. It attempts to have an emotional message at the end. It attempts to have a good, well thought out story with twists and turns. If you look at something like Only God Forgives, it's not attempting to have those things. Therefore, you can actually grade it on the merit of what it is actually pushing to the forefront, hence the style over substance narrative that we've seen really pick up in the past decade or so. So Suicide Squad attempts and fails to have the things that you mentioned, but other films do not. There's the difference. Like, good.
Now, if your argument was that you felt like Suicide Squad needed these elements and didn't have them, that's perfectly fine. But to say that any film that doesn't have these elements is automatically a bad movie is a bit strange considering all the different ways that a movie can be good.
No, Neo, as I argued previously, the problem is that it tried to have those elements and it failed miserably.
As soon as you start prescribing elements to a film and saying that this is what it takes for a movie to be good, proximity to films that were praised in the years before, then you're going to start to see the industry become very sloppy and samey. And if you are saying that all of these elements need to be included in order for a film to suit your tastes, then you have to acknowledge that your tastes are ultimately bad for the industry.
So I know that's a lot to digest, but that's actually probably one of the most insane statements that I've ever heard in one of his videos. So if I want my film to have a good story and like good dialogue, and when emotions are involved, I want them to be strong and powerful, I am contributing to the downfall and sameness of cinema. Even though all of these aspects can be portrayed so many different ways, I'm contributing to the downfall of cinema. Let me talk about a film that I just mentioned, Climax. Very interesting film, somewhat abstract, mainly visual storytelling. That film conveys emotions and has a story and does all of that well, but also Moonlight, probably my favorite movie ever, does that equally well through different mediums. Just because I want the thing doesn't mean I don't advocate for the evolution of cinema and the weirdness of cinema. I don't know how you don't understand this, but you're NeoJesus. Of course you don't.
If too many people are unwilling to expand their tastes, then we're never going to see evolution in this industry. If you try to hold every film to its proximity to another film that you love, then nothing new is ever going to get through to you. And the more that people do this, the more that people like me, who like to make and watch really bizarre content, start to suffer.
I don't know, man. He's wrong. He's always wrong. He's never on the nose. Keep in mind, this is the year that Parasite, one of the most critically acclaimed films I've ever seen. I don't know a person that doesn't at least like Parasite. And that is definitely straying from the norm of that cinema has cultivated with the Scorseses and Tarantinos and Andersons that he's mentioning. One Best Picture, and even if we fast forward to today, the most popular film of the year, one could argue, and by popular I mean loved by all audiences, is Everything Everywhere All at Once. A completely weird film that will more than likely get nominated for multiple Oscars. So he's wrong. Cinema is progressing. It's just not progressing at the rate that he wants. Apparently, he has very bizarre taste. So it seems like he just wants everything to be weird, old out, new in, and that's just not how it works. You have to be patient for progression. But NeoJesus and patience are not two things that are synonymous.
The fact that most movie critics aren't doing this, aren't expanding their tastes, shows how little they actually care about advancing the medium.
Yeah, this is just crazy. I don't know, man. Again, maybe I'm watching the wrong side of Film YouTube, but it seems like the majority of critics out there on the website that are even at least relatively popular do attempt to tackle indie films, do attempt to tackle foreign films. Of course, Jeremy Jahns is out there, but that's not the type of critic he's talking about. Jeremy Jahns is just Jeremy Jahns, and even people as popular as Chris Stuckman attempt to tackle more indie films and more foreign films. And you go a layer below that and you have the YMSs, you have the Karsten Runquinsts, you have all of these people who really do attempt to tackle different films. So I don't understand what he's talking about here.
Just like how their ignorance in the filmmaking process and their refusal to inform themselves on how that process works shows how little they care about actually advancing the industry rather than just making fun of it for the sake of entertainment.
So we finally really get back to the problem at hand. This is the problem that he has. He's made up this whole 11-minute unscripted thing in order to make it seem like there's some level of validity to the video that he made before, when in all reality, he is just upset that critics don't make movies, and he finds himself to be superior to them because he's made a student film once, like an absolute bozo. And guess what, Neo? Everyone can talk about movies, and everyone can have an opinion on movies. And just because these critics have found more success than you doesn't mean that you have to be so spiteful and jealous of them. Get over yourself. Make actual critiques of these people instead of hiding behind this facade of, ooh, I'm superior. You're not. You aren't whatsoever.
If enough movies aren't being released that are to your taste, then all you're gonna do is talk about how lame it is that most movies don't suit your taste. God forbid you go out and actually make your own movie and work towards improving the medium.
Have you ever considered that maybe they don't want to? Maybe they don't want to be a filmmaker. Maybe they just like talking about movies, which everyone has a right to do. And the fact that you have such a purist mindset that only filmmakers can talk about movies is so ridiculous. And the fact that you are such a terrible filmmaker yourself is even more ironic in itself. You have not made a film better than Space Cop. You have not made a film better than Lover. And I don't think these movies are particularly good, but acting like you're superior to these people when you haven't put in half the effort they have into filmmaking is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, fuck being the change that you want to see in the industry. And while you're at it, fuck expanding your taste so that way you're actually able to appreciate more movies than what you're used to.
He keeps talking about expanding taste when I can guarantee you 75% of film critics have a more expanded palette than this fucking dweeb. They do. He didn't know how to pronounce Synecdoche, New York. He said Synodoki. Synodoki. That means you haven't seen the movie. Have you watched anything else? And I wouldn't have this like volatile mindset if he wasn't so vitriolic and so just pretentious about everything and thinking he's better than everyone, when in all reality he's just a low-level college student who made one film for a 36-hour film festival and thought, man, this is my calling. I am the savior. You sound like every 14-year-old that watched Scott Pilgrim and decided they were going to be the next Edgar Wright.
While I understand where this mentality comes from, I feel like more people should acknowledge that the barrier of taste is a lot more difficult to get around than some would like to admit, and that a movie shouldn't be considered bad just because it doesn't have the same elements as a film that suits the taste of the general public.
Suicide Squad is bad. Get over it.
The message that I want you to take from this video is to go out and try to expand your taste. Try to appreciate more movies than what you currently do. And if you're just someone that's not interested in doing that, then just don't talk about movies on the internet. Because if you do, I'll make fun of you. I'll make fun of you and your shitty taste. Just watch me.
And in the final moments of the video, guess what? NeoJesus does it again. He kind of surmises the problems that I have with him. He insinuates that taste can be shitty, when in all reality, no taste can be shitty. I can think a movie is bad, but that doesn't mean if you like it, you have a shitty taste. It means that you think it's good, and you like it, and that's totally fine. We don't have to have a problem with that. But NeoJesus seems to think that people who like normal things, or more centered in nostalgia, more common troped films such as the apparently Tarantino's and Scorsese's and Anderson's are a problem. When in all reality, if you like those films, you like those films, and that's totally okay. So don't listen to the NeoJesus as saying that you need to expand your palette. If you want to expand your palette, expand your palette. I can say there are some awesome films out there waiting for you if you do that. But if you view films as a comfort form and you like talking about your comfort media on the internet, you're totally entitled to do so. You can't be wrong if you're talking about the things you love. And the fact that NeoJesus insinuates that you can kind of goes against his whole cynicism thing and how he doesn't like film critics who are cynical, when he's doing the exact same thing, thus proving the continued hypocrisy of our main man, Neo. And that's all I have to say about him. And I will leave off with this. Please let me interview you, Neo. I want to understand how your brain works. I know these videos were 3 years ago, but I've seen your newer content. You haven't changed whatsoever. Give me those brain waves, buddy. I want in. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Sorry that I turned an 11-minute video into a 40-minute video, but sometimes you just have to say what needs to be said. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you in the next one. Goodbye.